I'm okay talking with someone who's just wrong. Oh, Taylor Swift. I love this country even more, I think. Because I think that people who are innocent should be out of prison. And I think that everyone deserves the right to vote, and everyone should be counted in the constitutionally mandated census. And my policies that I fight for, would apply equally to conservatives or liberals or neoliberals or even racists on the far right. Like the policies I fight for, like home, like decommodifying homes, um, having making sure no one's starving to death, making sure everyone has electricity and internet and all these other things that you need to live in a modern society. I I I want them applied equally to everyone who lives in the United States. Um, and I think that that means that I care about my fellow countrymen. And when it comes to prisons, yeah, I want my fellow countrymen to be rehabilitated. I don't want them to be criminals. I don't want them to rot in prison for their entire lives. I want them to get better and to have a better outlook on the world. Um, but you know what, Rye? Even if fascists become unfashy, I'm willing to work with them. Okay. Well, Taylor Swift, this country is not a horrible place to live in if you have an okay amount of money. If you're struggling to get by, this country becomes a hellscape. Okay, because there's nothing that can help you. Um, but yeah, I like and basically I want to make this country a place where even if you don't have money, you can still live. Well, Taylor Swift, there are a whole lot of people in this country who literally can't make a living um, because of certain conditions. There are some people who get cancer and it suddenly wipes out their whole life savings. So suddenly they're 70 years old and they can't afford their mortgage payment or their rent. Like it's not that difficult to understand. It's just that life is random sometimes and can ruin people's lives. And you know what? Some people don't want to be burger flippers for their entire lives. Some people would like to be, artists. Some people would like to be scientists. Some people would like to be mathematicians, but they can't because they can't like afford to go to school or they can't afford to like have a few hours of free time every day in which they can pursue those goals. I want to live in a country that empowers people, and maybe this will help you understand. So there are two different concepts here. Um, let me pull this up. Okay, here we go. So there are two different concepts here. So you have positive liberty and negative liberty. Okay. Uh, Basically, in the system that you think is ideal, Taylor Swift, you believe in negative liberty. And what negative liberty is essentially the lack of obstacles. Um, so basically, um, you know, anyone can achieve whatever they want, but there's also like there's nothing preventing you from going out and becoming a billionaire. You can go out and be a billionaire right now, Taylor Swift. Why are you choosing not to be a billionaire? Um, but the difference is then you have positive liberty, and essentially the idea of positive liberty is that you have systems in place to help people achieve whatever their goals are. Um, and that's the kind of system that I would like to establish for our country. Whatever your goal is, if you have no goal, that's fine too. But like, whatever you want to achieve, I want to live in a country that enables people to achieve that. And not, and whether that is helping them go to school, giving them places to live, having them connected to the internet, having people with electricity and water and healthcare. Having these things all help people achieve what they want to do in life. Um, as opposed to negative liberty, where you're not guaranteed any of those things. And if you become poor, people blame it on you being lazy or whatever, regardless of whatever like external circumstances might have occurred to set you back in life. Um, and there are all kinds of things that can prevent you from succeeding, like having to pay for healthcare, having to pay for housing, having to pay for food, having to pay for like all these other things. So I propose that we help people achieve, and I don't think that that's a bad thing. Um, like, what incentive is there to trash the country if the country is providing you a place to live, is providing you healthcare, is providing you electricity, is providing you internet, is providing you all of these things? I think a lot of people lash out at the United States specifically because it doesn't provide these things, and because they're desperate and angry and sad. Like, yeah, I'd be desperate and angry too if I was suddenly slapped with a $30,000 bill for cancer treatment, if because I didn't have insurance, because I couldn't afford it. Like, yeah, there are a whole kind there are all kinds of things that can put people in these situations where they are angry. Um, and I think that you can see that a lot in marginalized communities. Um, where they in particular are affected by um, a lot of the even in an ideal like capitalist system, they're still affected by a the lack of obstacles and barriers because of the history of their community in that system. Um, and yeah, also a lot of people trash the country because they believe that they deserve better. And then oftentimes they do deserve better. Like, I'm a patriot who wants this country to be able to do better by its citizens. Because I don't think that what we've been doing is good enough. Um, it's just not. We're the wealthiest country on earth, and yet we can't make sure that everyone has healthcare. We're the wealthiest country on earth, but we can't make sure that we don't have homeless people. We're the wealthiest country on earth, but we can't ensure that like everyone has like equal access to information. We're the wealthiest country on earth, but we can't ensure that people aren't starving to death on the street. Like, I I personally I work with nonprofits in the United States. They it works in the United States and Canada. Um, it's a medical nonprofit, so it helps with sick and injured kids specifically. And fun fact, there are several million kids in the United States who do not have any kind of health insurance. Several million. So if anything happens to those kids, their family, or if they don't have a family, them in particular are slapped with thousands upon thousands of dollars in debt that they will not ever be able to pay, because the average family in the United States, especially if they're so poor that they do not have health insurance, um, doesn't have $400 on hand for unexpected expenses. Okay, and that was before that was a statistic that came out before the pandemic. Um, and you want to know some another shocking fact? There are over 40 million other children who are on Medicaid. Um, and if you're on Medicaid, by the way, Medicaid doesn't pay for all of your medical expenses. So all of those kids are still going to get a really high medical bill after they get their treatment for whatever is wrong with them. So I just told you, by the way, that in the richest country on earth, there are around 45 million kids who are either not insured or underinsured. And we live in the richest country on the planet. These are conditions that make people desperate, and these are conditions that make people cry out and want the government to do better. These are the reasons, by the way, that lead to um, the Medicare for All proposal being one of the most popular pieces of legislative like proposals on Congress's docket, and yet it won't get passed because a lot of people in our government are in the pockets of private industries. And that sort of corruption is why a lot of people are really angry at the United States, at their government, okay? So like, and that's just one example. Just one example. Um and we could point to other things as well, but like the fact that we can't get basic justice for people murdered at the hands of the state, the fact that we can't get Medicare for All passed despite it being one of the most popular pieces of legislation ever conceived in the United States. Um, all of these things combine and make people very resentful of the United States. And you know what happens when those people feel resentful and aren't don't feel like they're being heard by their representatives because their representatives are just letting them languish and suffer? Well, let me read you what happens here. Oh no no, here we go.
Me say, as I've always said, and I will always continue to say, that riots are socially destructive and self-defeating. I'm still convinced that non-violence is the most potent weapon available to oppress people in their struggle for freedom and justice. I feel that violence will only create more social problems than they will solve, that in a real sense it is impractical for the Negro to even think of mounting a violent revolution in the United States. So I will continue to condemn riots and continue to say to my brothers and sisters that this is not the way. Continue to affirm that there is another way. But at the same time, it is as necessary for me to be as vigorous in condemning the conditions which cause persons to feel that they must engage in riotous activities as it is for me to condemn riots. I think America must see that riots do not develop out of thin air. Certain conditions continue to exist in our society, which must be condemned as vigorously as we condemn riots. But in the final analysis, a riot is the language of the unheard. What is it that America has failed to hear? It has failed to hear that the plight of the Negro poor has worsened over the last few years. It has failed to hear that the promises of freedom and justice have not been met. And it has failed to hear that large segments of white society are more concerned about tranquility and the status quo than about justice, equality, and humanity. And so in a real sense, our nation's summers of riots are caused by our nation's winters of delay. And as long as America postpones justice, we stand in the position of having these recurrences of violence and riots over and over again. Social justice and progress are the absolute guarantors of riot prevention.
Yeah. So, oh gosh, he's such a good communicator. Um, yeah, what we're hearing there, to our good friend Taylor Swift's point is that we often hear from conservatives condemnations of rioting and of riotous destruction of property. Um, all the way, we hear this all the way up from the very lowest peon of the Republican Party to the very top, to Donald Trump saying this thing. However, what we do not hear from Republicans and from Trump is the recognition of those societal issues that contribute to those riots in the first place. We don't hear Donald Trump talking about the systemic racism in policing. We don't hear Republicans down to the lowest levels recognizing that there are conditions under which black and brown people live and other similarly marginalized people live. And by the way, when I say similarly marginalized, I'm also including poor white people in that too, because they're marginalized by class. Um, when those people aren't having their needs met, when we're not experiencing justice from our from our lawful, like the agents that are supposed to be fulfilling the law in the United States, um, yeah, those are conditions under which riots happen. And it shouldn't be surprising that riots happen. It shouldn't be surprising that things get burned down when we aren't experiencing justice at the hands of our government. So, like, yeah, it's riots are bad, but so are the conditions that lead to riots arising. And I think that that should be something that is evident to everybody, and that the state especially holds responsibility for creating the conditions under which riots occur.